And if you turn to the third paragraph, that is to say, why, what justification? Or fourth paragraph, you might say, because the first line is one paragraph by itself. So, fourth paragraph, what justification? Have you got it? Now there you see the third line. The world of matter is affirmed by the experience of the physical senses, which, because they are themselves unable to perceive anything immaterial or not organized as gross matter, would persuade us that the supraphysical is the unreal. This is another form of materialistic statement. The world of matter is affirmed by the experience of the physical senses, which, because they are themselves unable to perceive anything immaterial, senses can't perceive anything that is immaterial, therefore the senses would persuade us that the suprasensible is unreal. This is a jump in the conclusion. Because the physical senses cannot grasp anything that is supraphysical, therefore the empirist theory, which says that physical senses are the means of knowledge, and since supraphysical realities cannot be grasped by the physical, therefore it says the supraphysical is unreal. Now Sri Aurobindo says, just as there he spoke of arbitrary premise, now Sri Aurobindo uses a much more vigorous term here. This vulgar or rustic error of our corporeal organs does not gain in validity by being promoted into the domain of philosophical reasoning. Sri Aurobindo says that this particular statement is very often tom-tommed as a great philosophical statement. And Sri Aurobindo says that actually speaking, it is a rustic error, an error which only a villager can make, not an instructed person, not an educated person. A rustic error. And to put this rustic error into a high position as of a philosophy, Sri Aurobindo says we have to expose this philosophy and the error in it. It's a rustic error. It is like a villager who is for the first time brought on a railway platform where he sees an engine rushing with a train on the platform. And what does he see? A villager who is for the first time brought on a railway platform where he sees an engine rushing with a train on the platform. And what does he see? He sees that there is a piston which is going up and down. And whenever the piston moves, the steam comes out. He concludes that piston is the cause of the vapor, of the steam. And he says, wherever there is a piston, there's a steam. If you are instructed, friend of that villager, you will tell him, my dear friend, the truth is quite the opposite. The piston itself would not be able to move if there was no steam power first. It is because of steam power that the piston is moving up and down. And even then he will not accept you, because actually outwardly he only sees the piston moving and the steam coming out. Until you take him into the engine, show him how water is heated up and how the heated water produces the steam. And by the steam power, the piston is moved. Until you show all this, he wouldn't be persuaded. But nonetheless, the statement that he had made was a rustic error. Now that rustic error being promoted into a philosophical reasoning, and to say, look, this is a philosophical reasoning, Aurobindo says this vulgar mistake should not be elevated into a high position of a philosophical reasoning. There we saw it was an arbitrary statement. Now Aurobindo speaks of it as a rustic error. Materialism is a rustic error. Now, Aurobindo says, obviously, their pretension is unfounded. Even in the world of matter, there are existences of which the physical senses are incapable of taking cognizance. Yet, the denial of the supersensible as necessarily an illusion or a hallucination depends on this constant sensuous association with the real, with the materially perceptible, which is itself a hallucination. Just as perception of steam coming out of the piston movement is a hallucination, is the opposite of the reality. Similarly, all that we see in the world physically can be regarded as something hallucinatory from the point of view of spiritual consciousness, a dream consciousness. Now, if therefore the two propositions are compared with each other, then you find that materialist is assuming what he wants to prove. Therefore, Aurobindo says, second proposition he makes, assuming throughout what it seeks to establish, it is the vice of the argument in a circle and can have no validity for an impartial reasoning. Now, in logic, there is what is called circular reasoning. And circular reasoning is regarded as a fallacy. You are in philosophy, in a true metaphysical philosophy, not permitted to have a circular reasoning. A circular reasoning is one in which the premise and the conclusion are the same. You may use other different words, but if you examine, the assumption and the conclusion are the same. You start by saying that physical senses are the only means of knowledge. If you ask the question, why is it so? Why is it that physical senses are the only means of knowledge? The answer would be because Matter alone is real. Why is it the physical senses are the only means of knowledge? If it was to say that physical senses are the means of knowledge, there is no problem. But if you say physical senses are the only means of knowledge, and if you ask the question, why is it so? The only answer that the empiricist gives is that because only physical is the only reality. There cannot be another thing. There can't be other means of knowledge because matter is the only real. And if you say, how do you prove that matter alone is real? Because only physical senses are the only means of knowledge. So, when you ask this question, then that is the assumption. When you ask this assumption, then that is the only answer. It is called argument in a circle. You don't come out of it. If it was said, matter is real, why? Because matter is seen. No problem. But materialism doesn't say that. It says, matter alone is real. Why? Because matter alone is seen. And why is matter alone seen? Because matter alone is real. This is the reasoning, and therefore Aurobindo says, this is no philosophical reasoning. And therefore it should be banished from philosophical reasoning. It has a place, this reasoning can be a place in a theory of chance. Where you do not have reasoning at all, in a theory of chance, there is no reasoning, anything can happen, you are only to observe whatever happens. But if you are a philosophic reasoning, where the reasoning is allowed, reasoning must have a kind of a certain system in which you can't put effect as a cause and effect. There is a relationship between the two, and that relationship has to be observed. You can't say it happens, therefore it is so. In a philosophic reasoning, the argument from the conclusion as a premise and derivation of a premise from the conclusion is a fallacious movement, and therefore it has no philosophic grounding. So Aurobindo says, actually speaking, materialism is so easy to refute. It is arbitrary, it's a vulgar mistake, and has no basis for philosophical reasoning. It is so easy to argue, Aurobindo says. Now Aurobindo says, continue in the same paragraph, new paragraph, not only are there physical realities which are suprasensible, but if evidence and experience are at all a test of truth, there are also senses which are supraphysical and can not only take cognizance of the realities of the material world without the aid of the corporeal sense organs, but can bring us into contact with other realities, supraphysical and belonging to another world. Included, that is to say, in an organization of conscious experiences that are dependent on some other principle than gross matter, of which our suns and earth seem to be made. So there are, first of all, even in the physical world, there are supraphysical realities. There are in the physical world which are suprasensible. Take, for example, we are now told in the modern science that this physical world that we see is four-dimensional. Our normal physical sense is only 3 dimensions physically. We see the height, depth and breadth. That is our limitation of our physical perception. But now we are told that time also is a dimension of physical reality. And time cannot be physically seen. But it's a physical reality. So, how do we perceive time? We cannot physically see time. So even in the physical reality, there are suprasensible realities. This is now very well seen. Therefore, the argument that only physical senses are the only means of knowledge, that cannot anymore be sustained. Even if at one time it was argued quite seriously, but in the modern times when we have come to realize that even in the physical realities, there are suprasensible realities. They are physical in nature, but they are suprasensible. They cannot be perceived by physical senses at all. Then there are many other phenomena. Experiments were made by a man who was blindfolded and was asked to ride on motorbike and go around the whole town, and he could do it, to prove that he had supraphysical senses. He could see accurately the physical world without what we consider to be the indispensable physical senses. Now, it may not be a common experience, but even if in one experience it is possible, it can be seen that the physical world can be seen by supraphysical senses. There is a supraphysical senses. There are senses which are supraphysical. You can see, that is to say, there are sensations of hearing. You can hear which is inaudible. You can see what is invisible. You can touch what is intangible. Now, if these facts, in fact, in modern times, these facts are demonstrated. It is no more merely a few mystics here and there seeing all this. Even experiments have been carried out and these things have been shown. So it is easier for us now to say that this pretension of empiricism is no more sustainable. Of course, there are still empiricists who are not convinced.